So I've been a full stack developer, also known as a software engineer, for about 7 years. And I want to talk about my experience in the industry, my thoughts on the career, and advice for those looking to explore a career in this field. I started out as a junior developer back in 2015, and I worked my way up to this year as a lead engineer, managing a team of 8 for my most recent job. Even though I do have a bachelor's in journalism, I've never used my bachelor's degree in my career field. Instead, I actually learned how to code through a coding bootcamp. Would I recommend becoming a software developer today? Absolutely. I absolutely love my job. I think it's an incredible career. Now, would I recommend learning coding by going through a coding bootcamp? It really depends, but by and large, I think no. And it really just kind of comes down to the very specific boot camps that you're looking at, your personal motivation, and how much you're willing to spend. I'm going to explain my answers and talk about my experience in the tech industry, and feel free to skip to the parts that you find most important in the description below. Let's do it.
You're so cute, Violet. Yeah, you know it too. Yeah.
Throughout these 7 years, I've worked at 5 different tech companies, averaging about a year and a half at each one. Each time I switched jobs, my pay jumped about 15%. You may have already heard, but I am definitely going to repeat it. The fastest way to make a lot of money in software development is career hopping between different tech companies. That also means sometimes your title might change occasionally. My first job was a junior PHP developer. I was working on site for this small startup in Austin, Texas. I was making $40K a year. This was in 2015. This was my first job out of college. Again, my bachelor's was irrelevant. They really just said, hey, well, this guy graduated from this boot camp. He seems pretty cool. Let's get him. And I worked for them for a year and a half until I was laid off. The startup had downsized, their sales weren't hitting, and so usually in that point, it's the newest members on the team that kind of hit the chopping block, and that was me. After that first job, I moved to a different tech company in San Antonio, Texas, and also worked there for a year and a half. So after that, I moved on from a different company outside of San Antonio, one in McAllen, Texas, as a software development instructor. I did that for 6 months, and that was really not a lot of time. I really enjoyed being a teacher, but there was a lot of negatives, and I felt super burnt out. After my job as a software development instructor, I got another job as a full stack developer working for a company based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. At this point in my career, all of my future jobs were remote. So this was in 2018. I had gotten hired to be a remote full stack developer for this company, and I stayed with that company from 2018 to 2020, where I again got laid off after COVID hit in like March 2020. I shortly got another job at another startup shortly after I got laid off in March of 2020. And this time, this was a startup in the e-commerce space. And I was one of their first engineer hires, and I ended up staying with them until the summer of this year. It was a really awesome experience because it was that company where I grew with the startup, and I was able to hire 8 additional software engineers, all of varying skill levels, to join my team at this startup. And I just recently left that job to join a video game company where I'm now just a full stack developer. I don't lead a team now. Now I'm just part of a team, and really excited. I actually haven't officially started. I start like in 2 weeks, but I'm super excited for that job as well. Every time I'm making these career jumps, my salary is jumping at least 10 to 20 K. It's not one of the only reasons why I'm making these job switches. It is one factor in why I'm making these job switches, but really, me personally, I was just kind of tired of e-commerce. I actually really enjoyed leading a team, but it's definitely a lot more responsibility, which I'm going to get into at another part of the video. Software engineering is an incredibly enjoyable career field, and it's also really lucrative. It also typically comes with generous benefits packages. I absolutely love my job because I typically don't feel like I'm working. I work remotely in a very relaxed environment, which typically means I get to get up when I feel like it, I code when I feel like it, and I don't really typically talk to customers or even most other people at the company on the day-to-day, except maybe my boss, maybe through a couple like Slack messages or text chats, or other engineers, maybe a couple times a day. Also love my job because I enjoy building things. I like designing and I like problem solving. Sometimes that involves me reading documentation and analyzing code bases to see how features are built and how they function. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, just like looking at code, recognizing patterns, and then building off those designs and things like that. Here's what my day typically looks like as a software engineer. A typical weekday for me goes like this. I wake up and I'll check my phone or check my computer to see what meetings I have for the day. In a given week, I probably will have a daily stand-up with my colleagues where we participate in a 15 to 30-minute meeting where each of us takes turns discussing what we worked on yesterday and what we're going to work on today. If we have any stuck points or we need to talk to someone, this is where we'll bring it up and say like, hey Frank, I need to maybe get with you later today so we can talk about, the new database schema for this new feature or what have you. Once a week, this again varies by the company that you're working at, but typically I've seen that at least once a week I will attend either a tech meeting for the entire tech department or a company meeting of the entire company where the senior leadership team will give a company update or a tech update. And usually those, I don't even have to turn on my camera. I'm just there, just listening to what's going on. If I am leading specific projects, I might schedule some meetings with stakeholders, basically other engineers, or maybe other people at the company. If I'm going to build an admin tool for the marketing department, well, I want their input. I want to make sure that I'm building it with the right specs that they want. And sometimes that means like building what is called an MVP, which is called a minimum viable product, or a product document, just outlining what I am to build for that team. Hey, it needs to look like this. Hey, it needs to do this XYZ. It needs to, have, needs to be working by this minimum date, things like that. At this point, maybe 9, 10, 11 in the afternoon, I start working, which means, I make sure my code is up to date and I start coding, or I'll start reading documentation. There are plenty of days where me working is like not committing a single line of code. Instead, it's just like reading documentation and analyzing code bases. Sometimes it's watching tutorial videos on YouTube or on Udemy on how to implement something or how to get this to work. Sometimes it's just troubleshooting, an error that I'm getting on my machine that I can't seem to figure out why this isn't working. At that point, I'll start searching on Google or Stack Overflow, which, heads up, it's so true what they say where a good engineer is like someone who just knows how to search really good on Google. Like there's so much of my job that's just involved like, how does this work? What are the right search terms for me to find out that answer? So I like to take breaks every 1 to 2 hours and do things around the apartment, like wash my dishes or maybe do laundry, just to break up the cadence. So I'm just not glued to my computer screen all day. I continue to do this until I'm kind of tired, around the middle of the afternoon, maybe 4 p.m., 5 p.m., what have you. Although there are some days where if I'm not meeting the tickets that I'm completing on a sprint cadence, meaning if I have a deadline, then I'll probably work into the evening sometimes, but that's really rare. And every single time that I've had to do that, I've still really enjoyed my job. Once every 2 weeks, I'll have an hour-long meeting with my whole team where we'll review code, We'll do some product demos where we'll showcase what we're working on and assign new tasks to complete in a sprint, where everything kind of starts over. Now, a little bit about what a sprint is. A sprint, typically done every 2 weeks, is basically from the lead or the manager of your team. He breaks up things that need to be accomplished and he assigns it to specific devs on your team. Then those devs will have 2 weeks to complete that task. It's not a hard deadline. Very often those tasks do not get completed and then they'll just carry over to the next sprint. But you want to try to complete them within the 2 week time period. And there's an incentive for you to do so, because if you finish it within the 2 weeks, they typically won't give you more work within those 2 weeks. So you can knock it out in a week and then you have basically a whole week to do nothing. I'm serious. That does happen all the time. And yeah, another perk of the job, especially if you feel like you're a competent developer, just another thing, another benefit of the job. These are my personal opinions on what could be negatives for people and are definitely turn-offs on why maybe this career field may not be for you. Number one, you're gonna spend a lot of time in front of the computer. A lot of my other hobbies like music production and video editing and gaming are also in front of the computer, and it just never feels good to do 8 hours of work and then another like 5 or 6 hours at night also in front of the computer screen. I'm pretty sure that just does not have a great long-term effect on my mental health or physical health. And I don't know if this is related at all, but I do suffer from insomnia, and yeah, maybe it's because I'm just staring at a computer screen for like 12 to 16 hours every day. Number two, you need to be great at searching for the right terms to troubleshoot issues, or you're going to have a bad time. That means knowing a lot about computers, knowing a lot about coding concepts, like actual terms and definitions of what's happening, and just the internet in general. Things like, how does internet caching work? How do cookies work? How do domains connect to a website that connects to a server? How to install programs through the terminal or shell using something like curl or homebrew. Knowing what SSH means and does, and what Vim is as a text editor. There's so many things that you will just have to learn by teaching it yourself. A coding bootcamp is going to try to give you a wide range of basics, or an online course is going to try, but every job has its own specific technologies that you're going to have to learn. And that just might not be the thing for some people. If you're lazy and you like to cut corners, it just does not work in this field. Let me give you an anecdote. So when I was a software development instructor, I had a student that refused to learn fundamental coding concepts. Every time I would give a lesson and then do a code review or have a quiz or a code challenge, their immediate go-to was to search online for a solution, copy and paste the first result on Stack Overflow, and just post that as the result. And 99% of the time, that wouldn't work. And then the 1% that it actually did, they couldn't even explain why it worked. It's not like they had a fundamental understanding of how these things were working together and why their code was the right solution, and how they could even refactor code to make it even better, or flexible so that if you wanted to upgrade the code, how you would change some things to make it better. You're going to be very frustrated at the beginning, and it's going to take a long time to get good. Even today, at 7 years, I'm still constantly learning new things because the industry does introduce a lot of new concepts. Lately for me, that's learning GraphQL and React, and that's someone that's spent a lot of time in my career coming from Angular. I know those are just weird words for those of you out of the software industry, but it's just an example of like the industry sometimes just starts embracing certain technologies and eventually you just got to learn them. The benefit is if you're frustrated, it means you're learning. That is progress. And eventually it gets easier. And there's just nothing as great of a feeling as being able to figure out a problem and, be like, awesome, I figured it out, thumbs up. Number 4, last but not least, it might not be glamorous work. Sometimes you may be coding menu screens or optimizing algorithms to maximize like ad revenue share on your website. Some of this stuff isn't, exactly the most cool or glamorous type of code. I mean, it is very lucrative, and me personally, I love getting deep into problem solving or figuring this stuff out, but you're not going to get as much enjoyment like, say, hey, if you were a teacher and then you're seeing your students gain knowledge and being able to use that knowledge in the real world. The thing about coding bootcamps, spoken as somebody who has graduated from one and has taught as an instructor at one. Although I have graduated from a coding bootcamp to learn programming, I tend to not really recommend going through a bootcamp due to their high variance of quality and super high cost. Bootcamps are typically extremely freaking expensive, and you aren't really going to learn anything in that bootcamp that you can't learn from taking an online course at a fraction of the cost. In fact, a lot of online courses, let's say like the ones on Udemy, for example, again, I'm not sponsored by Udemy or anything like that, but this is just my opinion. They will have a go at your pace course on Udemy for like $40 that has so much more concepts and understandings with practical examples and things that you can download and build yourself and see how things are working versus a bootcamp format where they're just going to go at the pace as the instructors. And if you fall behind, which always has happened in my experience in the handful of cohorts that I've been involved with, they're just going to keep going. This is really where you can see the poor bootcamps versus the really high quality ones, because really good quality ones will have a lot of like tutoring options for the people and the students who eventually get left behind and give them these opportunities to catch back up. But the reality is, if you were looking at it statistically, a lot of these students don't absorb the majority of the concepts that these boot camps will just shove down your brain in the span of 12 weeks. And that's why I really don't like boot camps that much. Boot camps really favor a top percentage of people. Let's say in a class of 25, you're gonna have a good 5 or 10, depending on the boot camp quality, that just shine. I mean, some people are just smart and they will go to this boot camp and immediately thrive, immediately gain these concepts, and the instructors see it, they see it, and the instructors who work for these boot camps recognize these people are probably gonna recommend these people immediately to be hired. They just get a really good opportunity to get these jobs. When I went to a coding boot camp, I was not that coder. I wasn't like one of the ones falling behind at the very end, but I was like middle of the pack. There were some things I understood, there were some things I didn't, but I didn't really shine to my instructors or anything like that. Out of the cohort of 25 developers or students that became developers in my cohort, I would say maybe today, probably 5 of us are still in the industry as a coder. So many of us didn't get that job, and so many of us maybe just didn't like the field, and we just eventually phased out. So, and some of them maybe just went into management. They were able to go into leadership really quickly and no longer be a developer. But that's kind of been my experience. Now, what a lot of boot camps will do to really incentivize you to join is offer job guarantees. Job guarantees, hey, you get a job at least making 40K, 50K, or your money back. And that sounds like such a strong selling point. But as someone who used to work for a boot camp, they will do everything possible to not give you that guarantee. They will have crazy things in the fine print, or they will have these like asterisks to say, hey, you need to be actively looking for these 3-month period, and if you don't apply for 60 companies a day or what have you, then you don't qualify for this job guarantee, money back guarantee. And that's just super scummy in my opinion. I'm speaking as someone who literally, the bootcamp I worked for was a sham. So, story time. The company that I worked for in McAllen, Texas was this for-profit coding bootcamp that offered a job guarantee to students. They said, hey, pay us, like it was I think 10 grand or 12 grand. And with that, we will teach you all the skills you need to learn, become a software engineer. And we will guarantee you'll get a job within, I think it was 3 months was the offer of the company I worked for. So we had a handful of students. I trained them everything I knew, and they started looking. A lot of them did get jobs in the software industry, which was awesome. But unfortunately, a lot didn't. And the ones that didn't, well, naturally, they try to get those jobs, and the bootcamp actually offered to be the ones helping them get those jobs. They were like, hey, we will be your job. We'll find the jobs for you. You just basically show up or give us your resume and knock out the interview, but you basically have a job handed to you, basically, is how the bootcamp I worked for framed it. The bootcamp I worked for did not do that. They couldn't find these people any jobs. And so the 3-month period was up, and these students naturally, out of losing 10, 12 grand, needed their money back so they could make rent or, pay off their mortgage or just survive, have food to eat. And the bootcamp I worked for, the owner was just a really not great person. He absolutely just tried to do everything possible to just not give these people money. They had to sue him in court. And this was at this point where I quit because this was such a headache, and I felt so bad for these students that I, really believed in the company at one point. But it just kind of shows you that these boot camps are really dangerous. Like, there's some that are great, but there are some that are just not great. And you really need to do your research to make sure that you're gonna be able to thrive and actually have a bootcamp that cares about you and that wants you to succeed. Overall, absolutely love this career. And if you have any more questions, if there's things that I left out or things that you'd like for me to elaborate on, leave a comment. I would love to reach out and answer any of your questions. As you can tell, this is a really, really small channel, so I read every comment, and I'm actually very focused on producing more content like this to help people. So if you have an idea for a future video in tech, or if there's something in tech that you'd like to know more, like, hey, what does a tech manager's job look like versus an IC developer role, which stands for individual contributor, by the way. What are other jobs other than software developer, right? What's sysadmin? What's IT? Like, what's cloud engineering? What's DevOps? Like, I can talk about all of that if you like. Just, leave a comment, let me know, and reach out. I'm a really friendly guy and just want to help anybody get a job in the industry. So thanks so much, and have a great day.